the Bible's ridiculous. An intelligent designer, that's ridiculous. But then there's actually legit scientific discoveries that we're seeing and saying, wait a minute, like this actually could line up with what the Bible's saying. Why is Genesis mapped out in such a way that seems so linear? Like day 1, day 2, day 3, it feels like it's pulling you into that belief of like, here's exactly how it happened. Here's how you need to look at it. So why is Genesis set up like that if it was only really wanting us to see it more like poetic?
I think it doesn't matter how it's laid out, regardless of how it's laid out, whatever system we would find ourselves in, like right now we find ourselves in the scientific system and in a context that really we think through scientifically, we would look at it and try to make it fit what we think. If we grew up in a story culture, we'd be like, so why is it set up like a story? Well, it's just our context that we're in. So we're always going to read with our lenses, whatever's going to be there. If the Bible were written today, I think it would have been a much different thing, trying to reach people with a more scientific viewpoint, maybe just saying like, look, you might not believe in God, but let's prove to you why there's a God that's necessary or something like that. Yeah.
Dr. John Walton is someone I've read a couple of his books. He's a super interesting guy, but he talks about how during that time, there's this 7-day inauguration period for kings to enter a throne. And the way he interprets it is when the Genesis story is writing out those 7 days of creation, it's God ascending his throne. And when a king rests, a king always rests on the throne. So on the 7th day, when God rests, he's resting on his throne. And so it's about this idea that what we just talked about, there's one God, he created order out of disorder, and now he's on the throne. And when I first heard that, it blew my mind because I was like, wait a minute, they're not trying to make a scientific material explanation for us. They're telling us how God became king. And I was like, wow.
And see, this is the thing. Okay, so it's going to appear like I'm completely walking back my previous point here because I love this stuff. And I think it's fascinating to think through the implications of this, especially now, there's the more conventional understanding, kind of Newtonian physics. And now in the last 50 to 100 years, there's been much more quantum physics of thinking of like what's happening on the subatomic level, like what's really happening here. And it's fascinating as some of that research has become known, the more contemporary astrophysics, like right now, the way that most experts, and I'm not a scientific expert, okay? Major disclaimer. I'm not trying to set myself up as any kind of authority on this whatsoever. So I'm glad I put that out there.
You're not parallel with Bill Nye?
No. But
was he quantum physics?
No. But I am somebody who just loves this stuff. So I can tell you what I know. And so I do think, even though the Genesis 1 and 2 are not a science textbook, and we're not supposed to be reading science in that, I do think that God's winking at us. And this is where it gets really fascinating because I don't think it's the intention of it, but I think there's like a side, like, I got you. There is some science that's really interesting in Genesis 1 and 2. So it starts off and it says, in the beginning, meaning like there was a point in time. I don't know if you know this, but like 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, people were thinking that the earth or the universe always existed. There was this idea of a steady state universe, that it was forever and there was no creation. And that's why people laughed at Christianity because they're like, oh, there was a point in time. Well, you got Hubble, who was able to detect that galaxies are moving away from us. Penzias and Wilson came up with this idea of like background radiation. And isn't that interesting? In 1950, we realized actually there was a Big Bang. There was a point in time. And the funny thing, the irony of all this is that a lot of Christians get upset about the Big Bang, but the Big Bang actually justifies Genesis 1, where God says at a moment in time, let there be light. And if you really think about it, okay, this is where it gets trippy. And tell me if I'm going too long on this, but
I do want to direct us to like
the science.
I'm wondering if you're getting here.
I'm getting to the science.
Okay.
I'm getting to the science.
Get me to the science.
I'm getting to the science. And you're like, John, shut up. Stop talking. Don't say your stories. But there's a really good story here. So Genesis 1, it talks about how the earth was formless and void, tohu vabohu. And that means like there was no matter and there was no place for matter to hang. So it's like, imagine there were no flowers and there were no vases for the flowers to be in. It was just like immaterial. There was nothing. And so in that chaos, it talks about how God hovered over the surface of the waters. The most current understanding that we have in terms of astronomy and astrophysics is that at some point, everything exploded. And when it exploded, everything was dark. And all material, all matter it was so early in its development that it was shapeless, formless, and it was wildly chaotic. And as it stretched out, not even photons could escape. So everything was dark. And at a certain part where gravity and the rest of it all became at a certain level where it was able, and heat and pressure came to a specific level, the entire universe was bathed in light.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere, complete, like blinding lightness.
Mm-hmm.
And then it all settled out upon itself. And that's where, you have this idea of where everything, the molecules and the rest of them, they're all settling out. I mean, it is fascinating when we think where in Genesis it talks God hovering over the surface of the waters. The scientists call that the quark-gluon plasma. And they talk about how on a quantum level, everything was aqueous. Everything was plasma-like.
Wow. And
dark. And then at some point, everything ignited into light. And then everything after that settled out into matter. That to me is a wink that God's sending us from Genesis 1.
And so you're saying that there's actually scientific discoveries that at certain points, people are like, the Bible's ridiculous. An intelligent designer, that's ridiculous.
Right.
But then there's actually legit scientific discoveries that we're seeing and showing, wait a minute, like this actually could line up with what the Bible says.
Could they work together? Could they be back together again?
Right.
Could mom and dad actually agree on something?
Because we keep getting to these extremes where we're like, how could the Bible ever possibly line up with science? But then we learn stuff that says, wait a minute, this actually could be.
Now, I am oversimplifying a few things because when you look at, and you can probably speak to some of this, but like when you look at the order of creation, there are some things that don't line up scientifically. I think it's like you have
sun
trees.
after the light.
Yeah. Like some things there. But at the same time, the science doesn't line up with reason, so we had these elements that bumped into each other and exploded. You got a couple problems here. There's nothing, okay? It's not like a black room. It's not like an empty closet. It's nothing. It's no up, no down, no physics, no nothing. And somehow we got two little elements. And then not only that, but you got two things. Who wrote the software to make these things explode? Like, why are there rules like that? So science has got some real issues on its own. But when you put science and faith together, now you start getting some, this makes sense.
And so to bring this back to kind of, there's different views on Genesis and the creation story. And based off what I heard you guys saying are you telling me that literal days can't be true? Or is it one of the options that could actually be plausible? Like could 6-7 literal days be true? Or is that unlikely? Like, what are the ways as Christians that we can look at Genesis and come to terms with this? Like, is that?
I would love to offer an analogy that's helped me a lot as I've come to try to understand this, because I think it's probably more the second thing that you're saying. I think there's an opening for a broad spectrum of beliefs when it comes to the origin story of the universe in Genesis 1 and 2. Here's the analogy. There's a difference between a house and a home. Both of them are creative processes. Both of them involve creation. If I asked, like, hey, tell me the story of how this became your home, and John began to say, well, in 1972, the foundation was laid and they put the scaffolding up and the beams were put in place. That's a true story of how this house was built.
That's good.
But he could also say, well, in 2010, me and my family moved in and we started to arrange the furniture, and I put this picture up on the wall and we picked this room for my son and this room for me and my wife. Both of those are creation origin stories. One is a home, one is a house. And so when we look at Genesis 1 and 2, it's not really the house story. It's not like the putting down the foundation with the cement and the scaffolding going up. It's more about the home. It's about what God did to order the universe for humans.
I love that.
It's the story of how the house became a home. And I think if that's true, then there's space for, God, we believe in an all-powerful God that's sovereign over the universe and could have created everything in 6 days with age. He could have created trees that were fully mature and rocks that were fully mature in the fossil layer. He could have done that. He also could have used a longer process to do it as well. The Bible is a home story, not a house story. That to me was so helpful.
That's super helpful. And I want to answer your question specifically, but I want to tag off of that because I think this again comes down to where science and faith can work together. Science is structure, faith is meaning. And so we see this in all kinds of ways where these two people are still together. They're still married for like hundreds and thousands of years. You have something like law and justice. So we come up with laws, but the reason we come up with laws is because we want justice. And so justice is the faith side of it. Law is the structure side of it. They work together. That's why we have law and justice. Or you have math and music. Anybody would tell you that when you look at music, you've got intervals, you've got chords, you've got fifths and sevenths, and that's all math, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no one would tell you the reason why I'm listening to this song is because of, this particular note of that particular frequency. No, it's because it's music.
Mm-hmm.
And so math and music work together in beautiful ways. Why can't science and faith work together? You can do it in a way that doesn't rob from either one of them.